Hey guys, it's dhdsracer back here again for one more hobbyking review. This time I picked up a Yak 54 EPO Park Flyer. This little thing is recommended to be run on a 2-cell 1000 milliamp battery. Comes stock as a brushless setup with a 20 amp ESC. It's a full aileron rudder elevator ship. Claims to be a full, fully 3D capable, very small, about a 30-inch or 750 millimeter wingspan. Awesome little park flyer setup. So I picked this up. The build was incredibly easy. It was actually a really fun build because right when I opened the box I noticed it was just a very high density EPO, very durable setup. The build just flew by. I mean, it took literally 10 or 15 minutes to set up. There was almost nothing I had to do to set it up completely stock. There are things I would recommend doing that I did right off the bat. I am going to have a second video for this that has an entire build with pictures and a couple videos showing what I did and how I would recommend setting this up, because you have to be a little bit careful because some of the stock settings aren't really good enough to make this plane fly properly. It is a fairly dense ship, and it has a lot of weight due to that, and it is a little bit difficult to find CG. And CG is incredibly important, especially on an actual aerobatic airframe like this is. So if you are like 5 millimeters tail heavy, all of a sudden the thing wants to just tip stall and fall out of the sky. So that is actually one of the problems I found with this plane, is if your setup is a little bit off in terms of CG, it is virtually unflyable. So you got to make sure that CG is just right, and I'll have that second video to go through all the setup. But if you're just looking at this, thinking about picking it up, I'm just going to go over some of the flight characteristics. Basically, like I said, the build was very simple. It runs a single 5-gram servo as a wing to control your ailerons. Basically, it's a single right in the middle of the wing, and then there's a linkage setup. The only downside to that is it has no possibility for doing differential on your ailerons. For such a small plane, it's not really that big of a deal. You can still easily do snap rolls and all sorts of fun stuff. The entire airframe, all of the movable parts, come stock with an EPO hinge setup where it's actually part of the mold. It gives it a little bit of play, but they're very stiff and it's really hard on those lightweight servos. So you want to make sure to just cut those out and actually put some CA glue hinges or some type of other hinge, or at least relieve some of the stress by slitting the top of the EPO to kind of loosen up the hinge. But overall, when I got this thing up and flying on the 2-cell setup that was recommended, it flew fairly badly, to be completely honest. It was tail heavy. It wanted to completely fall out of the sky. It was lacking power. It's not the setup that needs to be in it. So what I found is, in order to get the CG without adding unnecessary weight like lead to the nose, you really need to run a 3-cell 1000 milliamp. So instead of the 2-cell 1000 milliamp, go all the way up to a 3-cell 1000 milliamp. And with the stock 3-bladed prop, you'll be well within the ESC just using the stock prop. I found that this thing lands really hard. Even if you're a really good pilot, you have to bring it in fast because it's a little bit of a high wing load. So since you're bringing it in fast, it's kind of hard. You can't flare it out. You got to kind of just put the thing on the ground. So I actually replaced the stock 3-bladed prop with a standard 2-bladed prop. I would say a 9 by 4.7 is probably the best way to go. 10 by 4.7 on a 3-cell is going to be pushing way too many amps, and you're going to probably blow out your speed control. What I actually did is, because this thing lands so hard, I took a GWS 11 by 4.7 and I cut that down to 8.5 inches. It's very simple. Just measure it out and clip it with some scissors and kind of sand the edges down so it's not too sharp. And that actually flew really good. The only downside to that 4.7 was it had a little bit more torque, and it was very difficult to do any vertical maneuvers because the torque kind of wanted to make it spin on its own. But it really wasn't a horrible characteristic, so I would still recommend going with some kind of 4x7 slow flyer prop, probably 8x5 to 9 inch in terms of what size. But this thing was actually really fun to fly. Once I got used to it, I had to dial my transmitter down. It naturally, if you loosen up your ailerons and your rudder and your elevator controls, if you put those at maximum throw, it's actually way too much, because this thing is not a slow flyer. You got to fly fast. Since you're flying it fast, it doesn't take a lot of control surface to make this thing whip around. So I had a high rate and a low rate setup, and on low rates the thing would snap roll in a split second. So high rates was not even used. I ended up turning my low rates down to about 50%, and my high rates were at about 75%, and that's with about roughly 40 to, I'd say, 55% expo on the majority of your controls. If you're running a fairly inexpensive transmitter that's not digital, I would recommend being very cautious and setting up very low rates just from the servos itself. Realistically, it's best to have some kind of a programmable transmitter, because expo is very, very nice, especially with such a snappy plane like this. But I'm going to let you guys go. This is a pretty sweet little plane, but again, it's not for beginners. It's definitely something you have to have a little experience with, because it tends to tip stall a little bit at low speeds. You got to land it fast. Hovering is very difficult just because it's got a high wing load. It's not a good 3D plane, but as a fast park flyer that just whips around and does whatever you'd like, it's actually a pretty nice setup. There's definitely a couple modifications I would recommend, such as doing that prop and potentially stiffening up the ailerons. I did have a couple little issues as far as flex on hard maneuvers. There was a little flex in the ailerons that wanted to kind of throw you off your line. But aside from a couple little things here and there, I think they have these in the U.S. warehouse even for about $70, and with a motor and a speed control for a full, little aerobatic plane, that's pretty good. And I landed this thing hard. I mean, it's really couldn't even be termed as a landing. It was a number of crashes before I found the setup, and it didn't even dent it. This stuff is amazingly durable. So for a really durable little 3D type plane, this is a good one. I'd recommend picking it up. Alright guys, we'll talk to you later.